The World War II was a world battle fought for 6 years, from 1939 to 1945. All the main countries of the planet were involved, though finally, the countries formed two major groups, calling themselves the Allies, and also the Axis. Let's find out 5 interesting facts about World War II you probably didn't know.
Number 1. Hitler's nephew was in Allied forces. One of Hitler's most ardent enemies, during the war, was his own nephew, William Patrick Hitler. Born in Liverpool in 1911, to Adolf's brother. William initially tried to leverage his uncle's political status, to spice up his own career, then again, fled Nazi Germany and wrote an article called, "Why I Hate My Uncle." He later emigrated to the US, and served within the American Navy during the war, and was even decorated for his bravery in conflict. He eventually changed his name, to William Patrick Stewart Houston, and lived a quiet, obscure life within the US, death in 1987. Number 2, Hiro Onoda, soldier who fought the war for decades. Hiro Onoda was a Japanese soldier, who fought World War II until 1974. Sent on a mission to the Philippines, and ordered never to surrender, or take his own life, Onoda refused to believe the war ended in 1945, and literally took to the hills with some other officers for company. They carried on a style of guerrilla warfare, against the local citizens, resulting in several deaths, and Onoda's own men were killed in senseless skirmishes over the years. Alone, desperate but undefeated, Onoda was eventually found in 1974, and had to be officially relieved from duty, by his old officer, who was by then an elderly bookseller. Number 3, George H.W. Bush, was almost killed by cannibals. George H.W. Bush, the long-run president of the U.S., narrowly avoided a diabolical fate, when his plane was shot down during a bombing raid against Japan. He was picked up by the Allies, but all the other men on the identical raid were captured by Japanese officers, who proceeded to torture, execute, cook and eat them, in one amongst the grisliest war crimes of the entire conflict. Number 4, Adrian Carton de Villiers, British officer, who became a legend. One of the foremost celebrated soldiers within the war, was Adrian Carton de Villiers, a flamboyant figure, who had already seen action within the Boer War and World War I. During his many exploits, he'd been shot in the face, skull, leg and hip, losing his left eye and one hand within the process. Despite his advancing years, he was desperate to play his part against Hitler. During a mission to Europe, his plane crash-landed, and he was captured by Italian fascists. The 60-something veteran then nonchalantly escaped from the POW camp, and went incognito for days, despite his striking appearance.
Number 5. The Nazi space weapon Sun Gun.
German scientists were genuinely curious about building a sun gun, which might incorporate an enormous magnifying glass in space. Based on the ideas of German physicist Hermann Oberth, the glass was intended to concentrate beams of sunlight, to scorch cities and boil the seas. It wouldn't have been much use against the Allies, though, because the Nazis calculated, it might take up to a century to create.